Well, what happens when humanity encounters a lost alien civilization beneath the ocean? The expedition had begun. A team of scientists and professional divers were gathered on the sleek research vessel Aqua Horizon, preparing for a dive deeper than any human had ever ventured before. The ocean was vast and mysterious, holding secrets below its surface that had eluded mankind for centuries. The team's mission was clear: to explore the uncharted depths of the Mariana Trench, a place so remote that it had resisted all efforts of discovery. The ocean was a world in itself, far removed from human civilization. The team's goal was to push the boundaries of human exploration, not just to collect data, but to uncover unknown ecosystems and potentially to answer questions about life that had been posed for millennia. Dr. Olivia Turner, the leader of the team, stood on the deck of the ship, gazing out into the dark expanse of the water. Her face was hard with determination, but the faintest glint of uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She knew this journey would be perilous, but there was no turning back now. The ship's engines hummed with the sound of anticipation as the team prepared for what would become an unprecedented adventure. Dr. Olivia Turner was the heartbeat of the mission. A marine biologist of renowned expertise, she had dedicated her life to the study of the ocean's most hidden creatures. At 42, her years of research and countless expeditions had earned her the respect of her peers. She was tall, with long black hair, often pulled back into a neat ponytail, and sharp green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her professional attire, a sleek wetsuit designed for deep-sea exploration, hugged her athletic frame. Olivia's calm and analytical nature had made her the perfect candidate to lead this risky journey. But leadership was not without its challenges. There were members of the team who doubted her approach, questioning whether the risk of diving so deep into uncharted waters was worth the potential rewards. Jonas Holt, the chief diver, was a man of action, not theory, and often found himself at odds with Olivia's careful planning. "Olivia, we can't keep second-guessing everything," Jonas had said earlier that morning, frustration creeping into his voice. "We need to dive to see what's down there, not just sit here and speculate." Olivia had responded with a calm, measured tone. "We'll dive when it's safe, Jonas. Safety first, then discovery. We're not just exploring a new world, we're venturing into one that could kill us if we're not prepared." Alongside them were Karen Lung, a passionate marine biologist whose youthful curiosity was as boundless as the ocean itself, and Zethar, the experienced deep-sea diver who had worked with Olivia on many previous expeditions. Karen had been eager to embark on this journey, driven by her fascination with the unknown. "What if we find something? Something that changes everything we know about life on Earth?" she had asked, her eyes wide with excitement as she reviewed the mission's data. But her enthusiasm was tempered by a healthy respect for the dangers they were about to face. Zethar, on the other hand, was calm and quiet, his experience in the deep ocean making him invaluable in assessing the risks. "I've been to places like this before," Zethar had remarked, his voice low but assured. "But this is different. There's something out there, I can feel it." As the Aqua Horizon prepared to depart, a sense of excitement and tension filled the air. Everyone knew that this was not just another routine expedition, it was the chance of a lifetime, a chance to uncover the mysteries of the deep sea and possibly to discover something that could change the course of scientific history. But no one was prepared for what lay ahead. The dive began smoothly. The team descended into the abyss, the submersible carrying them deeper and deeper into the heart of the trench. The lights from the submersible cut through the pitch-black waters, illuminating strange creatures that seemed to float in the eternal dark. As they passed through layers of water, each one colder and more alien than the last, an unsettling feeling crept into the group. The deeper they went, the more the ocean felt like a living, breathing entity, one that was watching them, waiting for something. Suddenly, the submersible's instruments began to beep erratically. Karen's eyes widened as she checked the screens. "Olivia, this isn't right," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "The readings, they're off. Something's causing interference." Olivia moved swiftly to examine the data. She frowned. "It's not just interference. We're entering a region with unusual electromagnetic activity." She turned to Jonas, who was already preparing to adjust their course. "Jonas, we need to move away from this area. Now." But it was already too late. The water around them shifted almost as if the ocean itself had changed. The lights from the submersible flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the trench. Zethar, who had been silent up until that moment, spoke with an unsettling calmness. "This place is not uninhabited." His voice carried a note of warning that none of them had expected. "We are not alone down here." The submersible lurched violently as if something massive had brushed against it. Karen gasped and clutched the safety bar, her breath quickening. "What the hell was that?" "Did you feel that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Olivia gripped the control panel, her mind racing. She knew they had ventured too deep. The unknown depths were no longer just a scientific mystery, they were a threat. "Stay calm, everyone. We're heading back up," Olivia ordered, her voice steady, but her mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. But as they attempted to ascend, another force, powerful and unseen, pulled them deeper, further into the dark expanse. The lights dimmed even more, and a deep, resonant hum reverberated through the submersible. "This isn't just a malfunction," Jonas muttered, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a rare anxiety. "We're being pulled into something. It's like the ocean is alive." The instruments were no help. They were now reading temperatures and pressure levels far beyond what was believed possible. As the submersible continued to sink, the temperature dropped, and a coldness more intense than anything they had ever experienced began to settle in their bones. Olivia's heart raced. They were entering uncharted waters, literally and figuratively. The readings were impossible, the environment more alien than she could have ever imagined. "What are we dealing with here?" Karen asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Is it a natural phenomenon? Or is something down here we didn't know about?" Before Olivia could answer, the submersible's exterior cameras picked up something on the floor of the trench, a massive ancient structure, partially buried beneath the silt. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Tall spires rose from the ocean floor, covered in strange markings, surrounded by an array of bioluminescent creatures. This isn't just a natural formation," Zethar said, his voice low with awe and caution. "We've stumbled upon something far older than anything we imagined, something that shouldn't exist." The team's excitement quickly turned to fear as they realized they had uncovered something that should have stayed buried. Whatever lay ahead, it was no longer a matter of science and exploration. It was a matter of survival. "We need to get out of here," Olivia said, her voice tight. But the water around them seemed to pull them deeper, as if the very ocean was conspiring to keep its secrets hidden. As the submersible continued its descent, one question echoed in Olivia's mind. What had they uncovered, and would they survive to tell the tale? The aqua horizon had descended deeper than it ever had before, its powerful submersible cutting through the waters of the Mariana Trench down into uncharted territory. The hum of the engines was the only sound that accompanied them as they plunged farther into the abyss. The lights of the submersible flickered intermittently, revealing strange, eerie figures in the water. Suddenly, the instruments began to behave erratically again, their readings spiking. Karen's voice trembled as she spoke into the comms, her hands tight on the console. "Olivia, I'm getting bizarre readings, temperatures dropping, pressures increasing in ways we don't understand." Olivia's eyes narrowed as she studied the data. This wasn't just a glitch. Something was happening. The depth at which they were operating had exceeded all known limits of human exploration. They were breaking new ground, literally. She motioned for Zethar to check the outside cameras. His steady hands worked the controls, bringing up the video feed. The view was incomprehensible. In the faint glow of their lights, the ocean floor revealed a landscape that looked as if it had been carved by an ancient hand. Massive towering structures, more like ruins than natural formations, rose from the seabed, covered in strange patterns that seemed to glow faintly. "Look at that," Zethar muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's no natural rock formation. We found something." His eyes were wide with disbelief. Karen looked over his shoulder, her breath catching in her throat. "Is this a city? A lost civilization?" Olivia's heart raced as she studied the footage. This wasn't just an unusual geological feature. It was something purposeful, an artificial structure. She could feel the weight of the discovery settling in. She knew this wasn't what they had expected to find. "We need to investigate," Olivia said firmly, her voice betraying a hint of both excitement and apprehension. Jonas, let's bring the submersible closer. Jonas, ever the skeptic, glanced at her with a furrowed brow. Olivia, are we really doing this? We've crossed a line now. Whatever this is, it could be dangerous. Ignoring his warning, Olivia nodded to Zethar. He carefully adjusted their course, bringing them closer to the ruins. As they approached, the strange patterns on the structures began to pulse, glowing brighter as the submersible drew near. A chill swept through the cabin. Karen's voice broke the silence. What are we looking at? This can't be real. It looks like it's alive. And then they saw it, movement, faint but unmistakable. Something large, fluid and translucent, darted between the massive columns of the ruins. The submersible's camera zoomed in, capturing the creature, something far beyond the realm of anything they had ever seen. It had a sleek, ethereal form, translucent skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, its body flowing like water, but it was distinctly not of this world. It was alien, there was no mistaking it. Karen gasped. That's not a fish. That's something else. Olivia was speechless, but a surge of realization swept over her. This wasn't just a biological discovery, it was far more profound. This was intelligent life. The question was, what kind of life was it? This is it, Olivia said, her voice a mix of awe and dread. We've discovered something no human has ever seen. This is evidence of an entirely different species. Her words hung heavy in the air. The implications were vast, more than they could have imagined. The submersible's cameras zoomed in further, and they saw more of these creatures. They moved with a grace that defied logic, their elongated bodies and luminescent features a stark contrast to the blackness of the deep ocean. It was clear now that the submersible's noise had caught their attention. The creatures swam around them, examining them with what seemed to be curiosity. Zethar's voice was low and filled with awe. They don't look like anything I've ever seen. They're not from this world. These creatures have been here long before us. He turned to Olivia. Do you understand? They've been living here in isolation for eons. But as the team processed this revelation, something else occurred. An unsettling feeling began to creep in. The creatures, although mesmerizing, were not the only thing in the water. The more they observed, the more they realized that they were not alone in the ruins. Other shapes moved in the shadows, large, hulking, and fast. They were closing in. Jonas's voice broke the silence. Olivia, we need to leave. Whatever this is, it's not safe. They're watching us. His tone was urgent fear finally creeping into his voice. We need to go. Now! Karen, who had been entranced by the creatures, looked up sharply. What do you mean, leave? We can't just turn back now. This is the discovery of a lifetime. But even as she said it, her words lacked conviction. The unease in the submersible was palpable. The creatures were not just curious anymore. There was an awareness in their movements, a deliberate approach as they swam in circles around the submersible. Zethar's voice was calm but filled with caution. Olivia, I agree with Jonas. We don't know what they're capable of. They've lived here for millennia without contact with the outside world. Who's to say they're not territorial? We don't know how they'll react to us. Olivia, torn between her thirst for discovery and the growing sense of danger, hesitated. But if we leave now, we may never get another chance to learn from them. This could be the breakthrough of the century. Jonas's gaze locked onto hers, and for the first time she saw the fear in his eyes. And what if the breakthrough is our last? We're not prepared for this. These creatures, they're not just some uncharted species. They're something else entirely. You saw the way they moved, the way they watched us. Karen's voice wavered, but there was a sense of determination in her words. I agree with Jonas. We've come this far. Let's not risk everything on a discovery we can't fully understand. Olivia knew they were right, but a part of her still longed to push forward. This was the culmination of her life's work, the culmination of all her dreams as a scientist. She had led this team with a singular focus to uncover the mysteries hidden beneath the ocean. But now she had to make a choice. We'll stay another hour, she said finally, her voice resolute but laced with uncertainty. But if anything happens, if anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. The creatures circled the submersible, and for a moment the team sat in stunned silence. They were no longer explorers, they were intruders in an ancient world. Every second that passed felt like a delicate balance between discovery and disaster. But even as they made the decision to stay a while longer, the tension in the air was thick, and each member of the team couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was about to happen. Zethar, ever the pragmatist, spoke once more. "We've been warned. It's up to you whether we heed it or not." The deeper they sank into the mystery of the trench, the more they realized that there was no turning back. Whatever they uncovered next would be something that would change the course of history or destroy them entirely. The tension inside the submersible was unbearable. The creatures outside had become still circling them, slowly watching. Just as the team began to feel the weight of their isolation, something unexpected happened. From the depths of the ruins, a figure emerged, gliding gracefully through the water. Its shape was unlike any sea creature they had ever seen. It was humanoid but distinctly alien. Its body was tall and thin, with skin the color of deep blue coral, rippling faintly with bioluminescent patterns that glowed in the darkness. 3 fin-like protrusions grew from its back, each one gently pulsating, with light marking its otherworldly nature. Its face, partially obscured by the flowing strands of what seemed to be organic matter, was a series of smooth, sharp angles. Its eyes, though large and almond-shaped, were a deep amber color, glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the submersible's walls. Zethar, as he introduced himself, did not look human in any conventional sense. His body had an ethereal quality to it, almost translucent in places, reflecting the light around him like water itself. There was no visible mouth, but Zethar spoke directly into their minds, his voice calm, measured, but filled with authority. "You are the ones who have come to us. We have waited." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The creature Zethar was communicating directly with them. This wasn't something they had prepared for. Jonas clenched his fists, his eyes wide, with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "How is this possible?" he whispered, though the voice in his mind had answered the question before he even asked it. Zethar's thoughts flowed into their consciousness, sharp but clear. "My people have lived in the depths of the ocean for millennia. We have seen the rise and fall of civilizations above, while we remained hidden beneath the surface." His voice paused, and the hum of the submersible seemed to blend with the eerie silence of the trench. "We did not seek your world, but now it appears your world has found us." Karen leaned forward, her curiosity overwhelming her initial fear. "You've been here all this time?" she asked, her voice soft but eager. "How is that even possible?" "What are you?" Zethar's figure flickered, his bioluminescent skin shifting slightly as he adjusted his position. "We are not of your world," he began, his words carrying an ancient weight. "Our civilization was born long before your species walked the surface of your planet. We adapted to the deep ocean where your kind could never survive. Our bodies, our minds have evolved in ways you cannot comprehend." Olivia struggled to process his words. "So you're saying you're not from Earth?" she asked, trying to understand. The enormity of what Zethar was revealing threatened to overwhelm her, but she pressed on. "You've been living here isolated for millions of years." Zethar nodded, and the light from his body seemed to pulse in rhythm with his words. "Yes, my people are ancient, older than your earliest records of human history. We have observed your species from afar, watching you evolve. But we remained hidden, for it was never our place to interfere." The implications of Zethar's words struck Olivia like a thunderbolt. For years, humanity had assumed that life on Earth was exclusive to the surface, that the vast uncharted ocean was simply a barrier to be conquered. But Zethar's people had not only survived beneath the waves, they had thrived, developing their own culture, their own civilization. Karin's voice trembled with awe. "But why didn't you contact us? Why stay hidden all this time?" Zethar's eyes seemed to reflect a deep, knowing sorrow. "We did not want to be found. To reveal ourselves would have been to risk everything. Your species is young, unprepared for the knowledge we hold. The oceans were our sanctuary." Jonas crossed his arms, his face hardening with skepticism. "And now you want us to trust you, after living here, watching us and saying nothing?" "What's changed?" Zethar's response was slow, deliberate. "What has changed is the threat that your world faces. There are forces rising from the depths. forces that seek to control your world to destroy what you know. We have protected our sanctuary for millennia, but your presence has disrupted the balance. The weight of Zethar's words was undeniable. The team had come here to explore, to push the boundaries of human knowledge, but they had uncovered something far greater than they ever anticipated: an alien civilization living beneath their feet, hidden in plain sight for millennia. Zethar's warning was clear: the ocean. This world was not theirs to conquer. It was a place of profound ancient knowledge and potentially a dangerous power. As Zethar continued to share his people's history, the team was struck by the depth of their civilization. They had built cities beneath the sea using energy sources that were far beyond anything human technology could understand. Their culture had flourished in isolation, their arts and sciences rich with ancient wisdom, untouched by the turmoil of the surface world. But as Zethar spoke, the tension grew. There was something in his words that felt both like an invitation and a warning. The civilization below the sea was far more advanced than anything the surface world had ever known, but it was also deeply fragile. A small shift, a single misstep, could cause their entire existence to collapse. Zethar then revealed that his people had long ago developed an intricate understanding of the world's oceans, the creatures within them, and the forces that governed the Earth's ecosystems. They had watched the surface world from afar, observing humanity's growth and its inevitable destructive tendencies. "We feared your world," Zethar confessed, "not out of hatred, but because of what you might become. You have the potential to either preserve this world or destroy it." Karen was the first to speak, her voice filled with awe and apprehension. "Are you saying we can't be trusted with this knowledge, that we shouldn't explore the ocean or learn from you?" Zethar's eyes glowed faintly. "No, that is not what I am saying. You must explore, but with caution. Knowledge comes with responsibility. The deeper you go, the more you will understand not just the ocean, but the very balance of life on Earth." Olivia felt the weight of Zethar's words settling on her shoulders. "And you want us to help protect this?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "To help you keep this secret safe?" Zethar paused before answering. "Not just protect, join us. The world above is changing. If we do not act, both your people and mine may face extinction. We have survived here for millennia because we understood the balance. Now the balance is shifting. We must unite." The team was silent, each member processing the magnitude of what Zethar was asking. Could they trust him? Was this the discovery they had dreamed of, or the beginning of something much darker? As Zethar shared more details about the lost civilizations beneath the waves, the team began to see the broader implications of their discovery. The ancient ruins, the strange artifacts, the creatures, they were all part of a hidden history that had been buried for eons. The knowledge Zethar offered could reshape humanity's understanding of history of life itself. But it came at a cost: trust, responsibility, and the looming threat of forces that could destroy everything they had uncovered. Karen's excitement was palpable, but so was the fear in her voice. "We've only scratched the surface. What else is out there? What haven't we seen yet?" Zethar's amber eyes glowed, his response a quiet, unsettling promise. "What you have seen is only the beginning. There is much more beneath the surface, things you cannot yet understand. But you will in time." The team's fate and the future of their world was now inextricably linked with the creatures of the deep. And as they prepared to dive deeper into the unknown, they realized that the secrets they were about to uncover could either save or doom them all. The atmosphere inside the submersible had changed. The strange creatures, once cautious but inquisitive, had become more aggressive, circling them at ever-increasing speeds. The team felt the weight of their presence pressing in on them like an unseen force urging them to leave. But what came next was worse than anyone could have anticipated. Karen, in her excitement to gather more data, made a fatal mistake. While adjusting the submersible's sensors to get a closer look at one of the larger, more intricately designed structures, she accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism embedded within the ruins. There was a sudden sharp sound, almost like a crack, and a section of the structure shifted violently. Debris began to fall from the ceiling of the ruin, causing a chain reaction. The entire area around them trembled, and the massive columns that had once stood proudly began to collapse. Olivia's voice cut through the chaos. "Karen, what did you do?" She snapped, her eyes wide with panic. But Karen was already scrambling to correct her mistake, her hands shaking as she worked to stabilize the controls. "I didn't mean to," Karen cried, her face pale. "It was just a glitch in the system, I swear." But the damage was done. The submersible had been too close to a critical part of the alien structure, and the consequences of disturbing it were now becoming clear. Zethar's voice flooded their minds, but it was no longer calm and measured. There was an unmistakable edge to it, an underlying anger that sent a chill down their spines. "You have disturbed the sanctum. The damage you have caused cannot be undone. It will take generations to repair what has been broken." The weight of his words hit Olivia hard. This wasn't just a mistake. It was an act of aggression in the eyes of Zethar and his people. What had seemed like an innocent accident was now a breach of trust. Olivia quickly turned to the others, her voice commanding, "We need to fix this. We can't afford to make things worse. We'll do whatever we can to repair it." But deep inside, she felt a knot of anxiety tightening. How could they repair something that they barely understood? And what would happen if they couldn't? Zethar's form seemed to ripple with frustration, his glowing eyes narrowing. "You must understand, this is not just a structure. It is the heart of our survival. You have disrupted the very essence of our existence. If you are not careful, you will bring ruin to us all." The team, still shaken by the magnitude of the damage, exchanged uncertain glances. This was no longer just about exploration. They were dealing with something far more dangerous, something they had no real understanding of. The submersible continued to drift among the ruins, the tension thick in the air. The creatures that had once circled them in curiosity were now hovering nearby, watching with what seemed like hostility. Karen's earlier enthusiasm had completely evaporated, replaced by a profound fear of what they had done. Jonas, who had been quiet up until this point, finally spoke. "Olivia, we can't keep pushing forward like this. What if they decide we're a threat? What if we've just ruined everything?" Olivia's voice wavered slightly. "We have to fix this. We can't just leave now. If we do, we may never get another chance to understand their civilization." But even as she said the words, she knew the danger was growing. Zethar's people were not to be trifled with. Karen spoke next, her voice trembling. "But how do we fix something like this? We don't even know what we broke." She paused, her gaze shifting to Zethar. "Is there anything we can do to make it right? Please." Zethar's response came slowly, but there was no mistaking the seriousness of his tone. "The damage is done. It is too late to undo the past. But your actions have shown me that you are not like the others who came before you. Perhaps you can help. The world above is in turmoil. We have no more time for the past. But you may help protect what remains." The team was stunned by this shift in tone. Zethar had gone from anger to something resembling an offer of cooperation. "You want our help?" Jonas asked, incredulous. "After we broke your civilization," Zethar's amber eyes flickered with something like understanding. "You are the ones who have found us. Now you will help us protect the sanctum of our people from those who would destroy it. You will protect the balance that has kept us safe." Olivia's mind raced as she processed what Zethar was proposing. "You want us to defend you, to help protect your people?" she asked, her voice thick with disbelief. "Yes," Zethar replied. "The forces that are rising now are not from your world. They come from the deep places, ancient forces that seek to take what is ours. The same forces that now threaten your world above." Karen's eyes widened. "What forces? What do you mean?" Zethar's eyes grew even darker. "They have been beneath the surface for eons, waiting. Now they are stirring. You may think your world is safe, but it is not. It is only a matter of time before they rise, and when they do, they will destroy everything." The enormity of what Zethar was saying hit the group like a tidal wave. They had come to explore, to discover, but now they were caught in something far greater. The fate of both worlds seemed to rest on their shoulders. Olivia was torn. Her first instinct was to refuse. This was too much, too dangerous. But she also knew that if they didn't help, there was a real possibility that both their world and Zethar's would be lost. "What do you want us to do?" Olivia asked, her voice steady, despite the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Zethar's answer was simple. "You will protect the sanctum. You will guard the knowledge that has been hidden for so long. You will defend this place from those who seek to destroy it." The gravity of the situation settled in. The team had come here seeking knowledge, but they had stumbled upon something far more dangerous. The stakes were higher than they could have ever imagined, and they were now bound to a task that could very well cost them everything. Jonas spoke up, his voice heavy with the realization that they could not simply walk away. If we do this, if we help you, what do we gain? What happens to us? Zethar's response was slow, thoughtful. You will gain understanding. You will gain knowledge that has been hidden for millennia. And you will have the chance to protect a world that is as much yours as it is ours. Olivia felt a deep sense of responsibility settle over her. This was no longer just an expedition, it was a mission that would change everything. They were no longer merely explorers, they were protectors. But in accepting this role, they were walking into a conflict that none of them could fully comprehend. The question now was, could they handle the weight of this responsibility without tearing each other and the worlds they sought to protect apart? The tension in the submersible had reached its peak. The knowledge that they were now tasked with protecting an alien civilization from an impending threat weighed heavily on the group. Zethar's warnings echoed in their minds, the urgency of his message impossible to ignore. There was no turning back. The team quickly realized that they had become soldiers in a war they hadn't asked for, and they had little time to prepare. The first step was creating a battle plan. It was clear that their primary objective was to safeguard the sanctum, the heart of Zethar's people, at all costs. Olivia gathered the team in the submersible's central chamber, her voice calm but resolute. We have to work together. The threat is real and we need to be ready. Zethar, we need all the information you can provide. We can't afford any surprises. Zethar's amber eyes flickered as he responded, his tone grave. The enemy is ancient. They are known as the Qatar beings from the deepest trenches of this world. They have been slumbering for centuries, but now they are waking. They want what is ours. They will stop at nothing to take control of the sanctum and its power. The Qatar were an ancient and powerful race unlike anything the team had encountered. They were physically imposing, covered in thick armored scales that could withstand the pressures of the ocean's deepest depths. Zethar explained that they were a warlike species driven by a desire to dominate all other life forms, both above and below the surface. They had once been a part of the ancient civilization that had ruled the ocean floor, but a violent schism had torn them apart centuries ago. Now the Qatar sought to reclaim their lost empire, no matter the cost. Karen leaned forward, her expression one of concern. What exactly is it that they want from the sanctum? Why do they need it, she asked. Zethar's eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. The sanctum is the key to controlling the ocean's most powerful force. It holds the energy that has kept our people safe for millennia. It is the heart of our existence. Without it, we would perish. The Qatar believe that by taking control of the sanctum, they will be able to harness this power and enslave both the oceans and your world above. The team exchanged uneasy glances. The situation was far worse than any of them had anticipated. They were no longer simply explorers. They were now the last line of defense against an enemy that could annihilate both human civilization and the alien community below the sea. Olivia took a deep breath, then turned to the team. We have to come up with a plan to stop them. We can't let the Qatar reach the sanctum. If they do everything we've discovered, everything Zethar's people have worked for will be lost. Jonas, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak. We're going to need more than just the submersible and our knowledge of this place. We'll need weapons, tools, anything we can use to hold them off. We can't fight them head on. They're too powerful. Zethar nodded, acknowledging Jonas's point. You will need to prepare. The Qatar are coming from the deepest abyss where even my people fear to tread. They move with a swiftness that defies logic, and their technology is far beyond anything you have on the surface. Karen, who had been studying the structures in the alien technology surrounding them, spoke up. We've seen some of their tech. There must be something here, some weapon or defense system we can use against them. We've been too focused on studying the ruins. It's time to use what we found. Zethar gave a grim nod. I will help you. We have technology hidden within the sanctum weapons that can be activated in times of dire need. But you must be careful. These weapons are not meant for your kind. They will require great understanding to use properly. The team set to work dividing into groups to explore the sanctum further and locate the weapons Zethar had mentioned. They quickly realized that the ancient structures were far more than ruins. They were a vast network of power systems, energy conduits, and highly advanced technology, much of which was dormant. Time was of the essence. As they began unlocking and activating different systems, they discovered energy shields that could protect their submersible from enemy fire, and powerful energy weapons that could strike from a distance. Yet with every new discovery came a sense of dread. The Qatar were drawing closer. Zethar confirmed their approach, and the submersible's sensors began to pick up the unmistakable signatures of their ship's massive, heavily armed vessels, capable of crushing anything in their path. "They are near," Zethar said, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. "You must be ready. They will come for the sanctum first. If we lose it, we lose everything." As the first Qatar vessels appeared on the horizon, a wave of fear and resolve washed over the group. They were about to face an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The Qatar were fast, brutal, and relentless. The fight for survival had begun. The team moved into position. Olivia stood in the command center of the submersible, her eyes scanning the monitors, every muscle tense with anticipation. "We'll engage them at the outer perimeter," she ordered. "Jonas, you'll lead the strike team. Karen, stay with Zethar. We need to ensure the sanctum is protected at all costs. If the Qatar breach the outer defenses, we'll fall back and regroup." Jonas gave her a sharp nod. "Understood." He turned to Karen, his face grim. "You ready for this?" Karen nodded, though her eyes were filled with uncertainty. "We have no choice. We fight or we die." The battle erupted just as Zethar had warned. The Qatar ships were massive, their weapons powerful, but the team had an advantage: the sanctum's technology. As the first Qatar vessel closed in, Olivia gave the order to fire. The energy shields activated, crackling with immense power. The first blast hit the Qatar ship, sending it veering off course. But they didn't stop. More ships appeared, and the assault grew fiercer with every passing second. The battle was relentless. The submersible and its crew engaged in a desperate struggle to defend the sanctum, their every move crucial. The Qatar were relentless, pressing their attack from all sides. But Olivia refused to give up. Each decision she made brought them closer to victory or closer to death. "Hold them off," Olivia shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We can't let them breach the sanctum. Hold the line." The battle seemed endless, the Qatar closing in on every side. The team's ability to hold their ground would depend on how quickly they could adapt, on how well they could use the alien technology they had unlocked. Each moment felt like a lifetime, the sound of weapons fire and the hum of energy shields vibrating through their bones. Finally, after what felt like hours, the Qatar retreated, their ships damaged and burning, pulled back into the depths. The submersible remained intact, but the battle had taken its toll. The team was battered, exhausted, but alive. "We won," Corinne said quietly, her voice tinged with disbelief. But even as she spoke, Olivia knew the fight wasn't over. The Qatar would return, and next time they would be ready. As the team regrouped, it was clear that this victory was only the beginning. There would be more battles to fight, and each decision they made from here on out would determine whether they lived to see the end of the war or whether the sanctum would fall. The battle had only just begun. The battle for the sanctum had begun in earnest. The Qatar ships loomed large on the horizon, their massive forms a testament to their power. The submersible and its crew had done their best to hold their ground, but they knew that the Qatar would not back down easily. Every moment felt like a tense standoff, the air thick with uncertainty. They had one advantage: Zethar's alien technology, but the Qatar were relentless, pushing harder with every wave of attack. The plan had been simple: hold the line, protect the sanctum, and keep the Qatar from breaking through. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that holding the sanctum would be no easy feat. The Qatar were a superior force in terms of strength, numbers, and firepower. Their ships were larger, faster, and more heavily armed. The humans and their alien allies had only one advantage: the element of surprise and the unique, unfamiliar technology they had unlocked from the sanctum itself. Olivia gripped the control panel tightly, her knuckles white as she gave orders. "Jonas, we need to focus on the smaller ships first. We can't afford to let them swarm us. Karen, focus on defensive shields. We need to hold them off long enough to counterattack." Jonas nodded, his voice firm as he responded, "Understood. We'll keep their numbers down." His hands moved rapidly across the controls, launching precision strikes at the incoming Qatar vessels, one after another. Karen's eyes were fixed on the submersible's energy shield readings. She was sweating, but her focus never wavered. Shields are holding, but not for long. We need to disable their long-range weapons before they overwhelm us. The team's strategy was simple yet effective. They aimed to outmaneuver the Qatar and use their advanced energy weapons to break the Qatar's formation. But the longer the battle continued, the more pressure mounted on them. Their energy reserves were depleting faster than expected, and the Qatar ships weren't showing any signs of retreating. Jonas maneuvered the submersible with precision, dodging incoming fire as they moved closer to the Qatar vessels. "They're pushing harder than we expected," he muttered, the tension clear in his voice. "We need to keep moving. They're circling in on us." The submersible fired again, narrowly missing one of the larger Qatar ships, but causing significant damage to its engines. The Qatar retaliated their weapons, striking the submersible's outer hull. Sparks flew from the console, and for a brief moment, the crew was plunged into darkness. Then the lights flickered back on, revealing cracks in the walls of the submersible. Karen cursed under her breath. "We've lost a section of the outer shield. We need to fix it before they breach the hull." Jonas turned back to Olivia, his expression grim. "We need to get them off our tail or we're done for. If we don't find a way to break their formation, we'll be sitting ducks." The Qatar were not just powerful, they were relentless. Each attack brought them closer to the sanctum, and with each passing moment, the team realized how much danger they were truly in. But they didn't back down. The humans fought with a fire that the Qatar could not understand, a fierce, unyielding desire to protect their world and their newfound allies. But it wasn't just technology or firepower that kept the humans in the fight. It was their spirit. The Qatar may have been stronger, but the humans' resolve was something the Qatar had never encountered. They fought not just to survive, but to ensure that Zethar's people survived as well. Jonas, in a rare moment of inspiration, initiated a risky maneuver that would allow them to strike a decisive blow. He guided the submersible into a narrow passage between two towering columns of the sanctum, taking the Qatar ships by surprise. With the Qatar ships following them into the trap, Olivia ordered the submersible to fire at full power, targeting the weak points of the Qatar's hull. The resulting explosion sent one of the larger ships spiraling out of control, and the rest of the Qatar forces hesitated for a crucial moment. "That's it," Jonas shouted. "We've got them off balance. We need to strike now." For a moment, it seemed like they might have the upper hand. The Qatar ships scattered, momentarily disoriented. But as the submersible pressed forward to engage them, the true cost of the battle became clear. In their pursuit of victory, the team had pushed their energy systems to the brink, and they were rapidly running out of power. "We need to fall back," Olivia said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're out of time. Our systems won't hold if we continue like this." But just as the team prepared to retreat, Zethar's voice rang out in their minds. "No, do not retreat. I will join you in the final push." Zethar's presence was overwhelming. His thoughts washed over them like a surge of electricity, and for the first time they realized the full extent of his power. The bioluminescent glow from his body intensified, and the sanctum itself seemed to respond. Energy coursed through the walls of the ancient city, and Zethar's people activated dormant defenses, massive energy shields, and weapons that had not been used in centuries. With Zethar's help, the tide of the battle turned. The Qatar were not prepared for the overwhelming force of the sanctum's hidden weaponry. The sudden onslaught pushed them back, and the remaining Qatar vessels faltered. "This is it," Zethar declared, his voice a deep, resonant echo. "They will retreat, but you must stay vigilant. This victory is but a brief moment in time. We will need to rebuild to prepare for the future." Zethar's intervention had changed the course of the battle, but it was clear that their fight was far from over. The Qatar might have been pushed back for now, but the true war had just begun. The team was no longer just defenders. They were part of something larger than themselves, caught in a struggle for the survival of not just one species, but two. As they watched the Qatar ships retreat into the depths, Jonas turned to Olivia, his face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "We did it," he said, barely able to believe it. Olivia looked back at him, her face pale from the battle but resolute. "For now. But this isn't over. We've just begun a war we can't afford to lose." The sanctum may have survived, but the path forward was unclear. They had won this battle, but the question remained, would they be ready for the next? The battle had been won, but the victory felt hollow. The Qatar had been pushed back, but a new, far more complex conflict was now on the horizon. As the team gathered in the command center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Olivia, Jonas, Karen, and Zethar stood before the holographic map of the sanctum, discussing their next steps when Zethar made an announcement that none of them had anticipated. "I have made a decision," Zethar said, his voice carrying an unexpected weight. "We can no longer remain hidden. My people and yours must join forces. It is time for us to integrate into your world. We want to be a part of human society." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, no one spoke. Olivia's mind raced as she processed what Zethar had just said. Integrate with humanity. It was an idea that seemed impossible, even ludicrous. The concept of an alien species joining human society wasn't just unprecedented, it was a potential powder keg. She struggled to find her voice. "Zethar, are you serious?" Olivia asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "You've lived in isolation for millions of years. Why now? Why would you want to join our society?" Zethar's glowing amber eyes seemed to soften, though there was an undeniable determination behind them. "You have seen the dangers that threaten us. The Qatar are not the only threat, and we cannot survive alone any longer. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the strength to help protect both our species. But we cannot do it in isolation. Your world is changing rapidly, and we must adapt to it or face extinction." Karen spoke up, her voice filled with both curiosity and concern. "But what makes you think humanity will accept you? We've only just met you, and there's so much about your people that we don't understand. How can we just accept you into our society?" Zethar's eyes glowed brighter as he responded. "It will not be easy, but it is necessary. Your world is on the brink of a new era. We are not asking to rule nor to take anything from you. We seek only to protect what is ours and yours." The shock of Zethar's proposal reverberated through the group. Olivia's mind was reeling. The idea of integrating an entire alien civilization into human society was unprecedented. The possibilities were endless, but so were the dangers. How would humanity react to this revelation? Would they welcome the opportunity for collaboration, or would they reject it out of fear? And what about Zethar's people? Could they truly adapt to life among humans, or would their presence create even more division? As Olivia stood there in stunned silence, Jonas spoke up, his voice filled with skepticism. "Zethar, this is a huge risk. Humanity is far from united, and there are countless factions that would see this as an invasion. You're asking us to convince the world that you're not a threat, and we're not prepared for that." Zethar's gaze remained unwavering. "I know this will not be easy, but you must understand our survival depends on it. We have already given you our trust. Now you must decide whether you can give us yours." The implications of Zethar's words were massive. A decision like this could change the course of human history for better or for worse. Olivia knew that whatever path they chose, it would not come without significant consequences. In the days that followed, tense negotiations began. The team, now acting as mediators between Zethar's people and humanity, found themselves at the center of an escalating crisis. The world above was watching, waiting for a response. The news of the alien encounter had already gone public, and the pressure on the team to navigate the political, social, and ethical complexities of this new reality was immense. The United Nations convened an emergency summit, and world leaders debated fiercely behind closed doors. The questions that arose were profound, and the answers far from clear. Olivia, Jonas, and Karen took turns meeting with government officials and scientists, presenting the case for cooperation with Zethar's people. The negotiations were difficult and tense, with the group facing staunch opposition from military leaders and factions within governments who feared the implications of such a union. "What we're talking about here is unprecedented," said a U.S. delegate, his tone skeptical. "We've barely scratched the surface of understanding their technology, their biology. How can we trust them?" Karen's voice was calm but firm. "We're not asking you to trust them blindly. What we're proposing is a partnership, our two species working together. But that means we need time to build that trust. We need transparency, communication, and a gradual integration." The most difficult part of the negotiations was addressing the fear and mistrust that existed on both sides. Zethar's people, despite their centuries of isolation, were not without their own fears. They had seen the destructive tendencies of humanity from afar. To them, the surface world was a place of chaos and danger. They had no guarantee that humans would accept them, and many among their own people were unsure if the risk was worth taking. As the negotiations continued, the team faced difficult questions. Could the two species truly coexist? Could humanity adapt to the sudden presence of an alien race in their midst? The challenges were immense. Cultural differences, technological disparities, and the fear of the unknown were just the beginning. Zethar's people had lived for millennia in isolation, and their way of life was vastly different from that of humans. They had their own customs, their own values, and their own sense of time. Integrating them into human society would require not only technological adaptation, but also a deep cultural exchange. For Zethar's people, this meant learning to live in a world that was both alien and chaotic. For humans, it meant accepting that their world was no longer theirs alone. As the negotiations reached their peak, a new question emerged. What would the world's reaction be? The information had been released to the public, and humanity was faced with an overwhelming decision. Governments, media outlets, and ordinary citizens all grappled with the implications of this revelation. Some saw the potential for a brighter future where two intelligent species could learn from each other and thrive together. Others saw it as a threat, an alien force entering human society, a challenge to the very foundation of what it meant to be human. The team's decision to share this discovery with the world was not without consequences. It brought both hope and fear, admiration and resentment. And as Olivia stood before the United Nations, ready to present their final proposal, she realized that the world would never be the same. The choice to integrate Zethar's people into human society would have far-reaching consequences. For better or for worse, humanity would have to adapt to a new reality, one where the lines between alien and human were no longer clear. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was a turning point in history. Would the world accept Zethar's people into their fold, or would fear and prejudice drive them away? The decision lay in the hands of both humanity and the alien race that had once been hidden beneath the ocean's depths. But as Olivia reflected on everything that had happened, she knew that the future would be shaped by one fundamental truth. The world had changed forever, and there was no going back. For the members of the team, life would never be the same. They had witnessed the impossible and been part of something that would be remembered for centuries. But the journey they had embarked on was far from over. The challenges of integrating Zethar's people into human society would test them in ways they could never have imagined. And the world they returned to would be vastly different from the one they had left behind. Olivia, Jonas, and Karen would have to navigate a new world, one where the boundaries between species, cultures, and worlds were no longer defined by the earth beneath their feet. The news had spread across the globe like wildfire. What had once been a secret, a discovery buried in the depths of the ocean, was now a reality. The world knew. The existence of an alien civilization beneath the ocean's surface was no longer just a scientific curiosity, it was a paradigm. Shifting revelation that had shaken the very foundations of human understanding. The team of explorers who had uncovered this hidden world found themselves at the center of a global storm, one that none of them had ever imagined. As the team emerged from their submersible, the weight of their decision to share the information with the world became immediately apparent. The scientific community, once eager to learn more, was now divided. Some hailed the discovery as the most groundbreaking achievement in human history, a step toward unraveling the mysteries of the universe. Others, however, saw it as a threat, something far too dangerous to be exposed to the world. The governments of the world were equally divided, with some pushing for further investigation and others calling for immediate containment of the situation. "What have we done?" Jonas muttered under his breath as the media frenzy surrounding them grew louder. The group had expected excitement, but the reality was far more chaotic. This wasn't supposed to be a war. It was supposed to be discovery. Olivia stood in front of a massive digital screen in the control room, watching the news coverage with a mixture of disbelief and regret. The faces of politicians, scientists, and media outlets filled the screen, each with their own perspective on what they had found. The United Nations had called an emergency session, and world leaders were now debating the implications of this alien presence on Earth. "The reaction from the scientific community has been overwhelming," Olivia said to the group, her voice tense. "Some are calling for further exploration, while others Others are already calling for the alien species to be quarantined to be studied in isolation. I didn't expect this. Zethar, who had been present in the control room, watching the events unfold, shifted uncomfortably. His people, who had spent millennia hiding from humanity, were now being thrust into the world's spotlight. "We never imagined we would be exposed to your world so quickly," he said. "But I fear what will happen next." Fear of the unknown often breeds distrust. Indeed, the world's reaction was far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Governments scrambled to understand how to regulate the presence of an alien species on Earth. Some nations saw the potential for technological advancements, while others feared that the knowledge Zethar's people possessed could be used for destructive purposes. There was talk of military responses, surveillance, and even the possibility of isolating the sanctum to prevent any further interaction between the aliens and humanity. "How do you think they'll respond?" Karen asked, looking at Olivia. "The governments, the people? Do you think they'll accept them, or will they reject them?" "Outright, I don't know," Olivia replied. "I wish I had an answer. But what I do know is that things will never be the same. There's no going back now." The impact of the discovery was far-reaching. People around the world were grappling with the idea that the ocean, once thought to be an endless frontier of mystery, now held a hidden history, a history that stretched back eons, far beyond the reach of human exploration. The public's perception of the ocean was forever altered, and in turn, the way humanity viewed the universe itself began to shift. What had once been a distant dream, contact with alien life, was now a reality. For some, this opened up endless possibilities, a future where Earth could potentially join the galactic community. For others, it represented a threat they weren't ready to face. The situation was not just one of scientific discovery, it was one of cultural adaptation. Zethar's people, having lived for so long in isolation, were now forced to confront the reality of integration. How would they adapt to human society? Could they? The first step was to establish communication and learn from one another. But the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. "What's going to happen to them now?" Karen asked quietly. "Will they fit in? How could they, with their culture so different?" Zethar met her gaze, his expression solemn. "We have lived in isolation for millennia, but we have always observed. We understand human culture, but living within it will be difficult. My people are not like yours, but we will learn. We must." Meanwhile, the team found themselves caught in a whirlwind of internal conflict. The weight of their discovery and the subsequent sharing of it with the world had not just affected the world at large, it had begun to affect them as individuals. There were moments of doubt, of regret. They had uncovered something far greater than they had imagined, and the consequences of their actions were beginning to weigh heavily on them. "I should have never agreed to share this," Jonas said one evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings with government officials. "We've opened Pandora's box, and now we can't close it." "What if we've made a mistake, Jonas? It's not just our decision," Olivia replied, her voice strained. "We've had to let the world know. But that doesn't mean it's easy. The pressure, the responsibility, it's not just on us anymore. It's on all of humanity." The team's internal struggles were mirrored by external pressures. As they continued to navigate the political and social chaos surrounding their discovery, they also had to face the reality of their own relationships with each other. The earlier unity they had shared was beginning to fray. The weight of their choices and the overwhelming pressure of the world's expectations was causing cracks in their once solid teamwork. Karen, ever the optimist, was the first to voice her concerns. "We can't let this tear us apart. We've always worked as a team. We have to remember that. We can't lose sight of why we're doing this." Jonas looked at her, then at Olivia, and nodded slowly. "We need to find common ground again. For them, for the sanctum, for the world." But the question remained, could they? Could they come together again after everything had changed? The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, debates, and media appearances. The world was in a state of flux with no clear answers in sight. The one thing that was certain was that the discovery had irrevocably altered the course of human history. But as the team faced the uncertainty of the future, they knew one thing for sure: they had made a decision that would forever change the fabric of society. As Zethar's people began to make tentative steps into human society, the world watched with a mixture of awe and fear. Would humanity rise to the challenge, or would they falter under the weight of the unknown? For the team, the journey was far from over. They had discovered a hidden world, but in doing so, they had opened a door that no one, not even them, could predict the consequences of. Their lives and the future of both species would never be the same. The idea of an alien species joining human society was nothing short of revolutionary. What had begun as a moment of awe and wonder quickly turned into a battleground of ideas, values, and fears. Zethar's people, once isolated in the depths of the ocean, now stood at the threshold of humanity's world. But the road to integration was anything but smooth. Societies around the globe, already divided by political, cultural, and economic pressures, were now grappling with the idea that the Earth was no longer just for humans. The realization that an alien race was seeking to join their society created waves of uncertainty, fear, and excitement. The first major hurdle came with the question of acceptance. How would society react to the presence of the aliens in their world? Olivia, Jonas, and Karen, now deeply embedded in the diplomatic process, quickly realized that the response was not as welcoming as they had hoped. Governments, especially those with their own military or economic agendas, were divided. Some viewed the integration of Zethar's people as an opportunity to push humanity into a new era, one where they could exchange knowledge and technology that would propel them into a more advanced future. Others saw the presence of these alien beings as a potential threat, one that could destabilize the current global balance of power. The world's reaction was polarized. Protests erupted in major cities, with some rallying to support the peaceful coexistence of humanity and Zethar's people, while others feared an invasion, an overpowering of human culture, and a depletion of Earth's already scarce resources. There was a deep underlying fear that Zethar's people might take more than they gave, potentially overshadowing human efforts to control their own destiny. Jonas, who had once been eager to share this discovery with the world, now felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "What have we done?" he muttered, staring at the news footage of angry protesters, some calling for the aliens to be expelled from the Earth. This was supposed to be about discovery, not war. Olivia, who had always been the level-headed leader, struggled to find the right words in the face of these mounting tensions. "We didn't start this, but now we have to find a way to end it," she said, her voice heavy with the burden of responsibility. At the heart of the unrest was the political question of what the integration of Zethar's people would mean. Could the governments of the world, divided by their own internal issues, come together to find a fair solution? Or would the introduction of an alien species create further division, worsening the already fragile state of global politics? Zethar, who had once been a calm and collected figure, now stood at the center of a storm. The peaceful, isolated society that he had known was no longer tenable. His people, thrust into the open, were struggling to adapt to a world that was not their own, just as the world above was struggling to accept them. "There is no going back," Zethar said quietly as he watched the protests unfold on the screens. "The world cannot stay divided like this. We must find a way to work together, or it will all fall apart." But Zethar's words, though wise, were met with skepticism. The core issue was clear. How could two vastly different civilizations, one that had lived in seclusion for millennia and one that had evolved in open conflict, possibly coexist? Was peaceful integration even possible? The answer seemed elusive, and the protests and debates only seemed to deepen the divide. One side of the world cried out for unity, for the chance to learn from the alien civilization, while the other screamed for preservation of humanity's way of life, fearing that any concessions could lead to their downfall. In the midst of the chaos, the team found themselves torn between two worlds. They had been the bridge between the ocean's depths and the surface world, but now that bridge was becoming more like a chasm. Their mission had evolved from one of discovery to one of mediation. They were no longer just scientists, they were diplomats, advocates, and representatives of two vastly different worlds. And as they tried to find common ground between the opposing sides, they realized just how difficult that would be. "I never thought it would be like this," Karen said one night, pacing in the submersible's narrow control room. "I thought we'd be celebrated. Instead, we're being torn apart." Olivia stood at the window, watching the lights of the city flicker in the distance. "We're not just dealing with a political crisis," she said quietly. "We're dealing with the entire foundation of how humanity sees itself. We're no longer alone, and that changes everything." But even as the team grappled with these realities, they couldn't deny the potential of what lay ahead. They couldn't abandon the hope that humanity and Zethar's people could find a way to coexist. But how, in the midst of all the uncertainty, Zethar made a surprising move, one that shocked the team. He proposed an unprecedented solution Zethar offered to personally address the United Nations and the world's governments, not as a leader of an alien race, but as an ambassador for peaceful coexistence. He would not just ask for acceptance, he would pledge to help humanity to share his people's knowledge in exchange for a mutual commitment to peace. This is the only way, Zethar insisted. If we continue down the path of division, we will all fall. We must create a new future together. The team was stunned. Zethar's willingness to step forward was a bold if risky move. It was one that could either bridge the gap between their worlds or destroy any chance of peaceful coexistence. But in that moment, Olivia realized something crucial. If they didn't act, if they didn't take this leap of faith, the world might never move past its fear. Zethar's address to the world's leaders became the pivotal moment in the battle for integration. The speech was calm but impassioned, filled with both humility and strength. Zethar's people were not conquerors, they were survivors. And just like humanity, they sought a future of cooperation, not conflict. It is not enough to survive, Zethar said in his speech, his voice resonating through the halls of the United Nations. We must learn to live together to understand one another. Our strength lies not in what we possess, but in what we can give. The response was mixed. Some leaders stood in support, moved by Zethar's words. Others remained steadfast in their skepticism. But as the speech ended, something shifted. The world was still divided, but there was now a glimmer of hope that peace could be achieved. Back in the control room, Jonas turned to Olivia, his face set in determination. We may not have all the answers yet, but maybe we've finally started the conversation we needed to have. Olivia nodded, her mind whirling with the enormity of the task ahead. It's a start, but we've got a long way to go. And so the team stood at the crossroads of two worlds, one human, one alien, each struggling to understand the other, each fearful of the unknown. The road to integration would not be easy, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was the only road that led to a future where both species could survive and thrive together. The peace that had once seemed possible between humanity and Zethar's people had proven to be fragile. Despite Zethar's efforts to integrate his civilization into human society, tensions were rising and the world was beginning to splinter. What had initially been a diplomatic struggle for coexistence had quickly escalated into a full-blown conflict dividing societies and governments across the globe. The alien presence was no longer just a scientific marvel, it had become a political and military flashpoint. Nations were divided on how to handle the situation. Some governments had embraced the idea of peaceful cooperation with the aliens, seeing the integration as an opportunity to advance humanity's knowledge and technology. Others, however, viewed the arrival of Zethar's people as an existential threat, one that could undermine human autonomy and destabilize global power dynamics. The fear of alien invasion combined with the rising political instability created a volatile environment where every action seemed to push the world closer to open conflict. As the rhetoric of division and fear gained momentum, protests broke out in major cities and demonstrations in favor of protecting Earth's sovereignty clashed with those calling for peace and cooperation with the aliens. The streets became battlegrounds with the future of the planet hanging in the balance. In the midst of the chaos, the question remained, could the human race already divided withstand the pressure of this unprecedented crisis? The United Nations, once a forum for diplomacy and cooperation, became a place of intense disagreement, with countries pulling away from the discussions and forming their own alliances based on their views of the alien presence. The political landscape had shifted so drastically that alliances that had stood for decades were now on the verge of crumbling. Countries that once considered themselves global partners were now on opposing sides, with some forming military coalitions to counter the perceived alien threat. In the midst of this geopolitical chaos, the question arose, could the alien-human relationship spiral into an all-out war? Some factions within the alien community, seeing humanity's reluctance to embrace them, were beginning to question the wisdom of continued peaceful efforts. Meanwhile, human leaders who had supported the integration of Zethar's people were under increasing pressure from their citizens to take action against the alien presence. The balance of power seemed on the edge of collapse. The team of explorers found themselves at the heart of this storm. They had once sought only knowledge, but now they were faced with a far more complex and dangerous task, preventing a global catastrophe. Olivia, Jonas, and Karen found themselves torn between their moral duty to help both humans and aliens, and the overwhelming fear that their involvement in the escalating conflict would put them and their families in danger. "Do we intervene?" Jonas asked, looking at Olivia with a mixture of anxiety and frustration. "If we don't, humanity could destroy itself. But if we do, we risk becoming enemies of both sides. We're not soldiers, we're scientists." Olivia took a deep breath, weighing the decision. "We can't stand by and do nothing. We've seen what happens when people fear the unknown. If we don't step in, it might be too late to stop the war from happening." Karen spoke up, her voice filled with hesitation. "But what if we make it worse? What if we're just adding fuel to the fire? We're already walking a dangerous line." The team was divided and the pressure was mounting. On one hand, they had a moral obligation to stop the violence, to mediate between the two sides and find a peaceful resolution. On the other hand, their safety and the safety of those they loved was at stake. No matter what they chose, the outcome was uncertain. Meanwhile, Zethar, who had been listening quietly to the team's deliberations, finally spoke up with an unexpected decision. "I have a plan to end this conflict," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "It will not involve violence, and it will not lead to war." The team looked at him, their curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, her voice tinged with both hope and skepticism. Zethar stood tall, his bioluminescent form glowing brightly in the dim light of the submersible. "I have been in contact with the leaders of both human factions and my own people. I know the fear that drives them, but fear is not the answer. We must show them that peace is possible." His plan, though ambitious, had the potential to change everything. Zethar suggested a radical approach, a demonstration of shared strength, a symbolic act that would show the world that humanity and his people could coexist without conflict. He proposed the formation of a joint task force, a group made up of both humans and aliens, to respond to the growing threats in the ocean. This task force would work together to prevent any further military escalation, while at the same time providing a tangible demonstration of cooperation between the two species. "This task force will demonstrate what we can achieve when we work together," Zethar explained. "We will show both sides that we are not enemies, but allies. This is the only way to change the narrative, to show the world that unity, not division, will lead to survival." Zethar's decision to move forward with this plan sent shockwaves through the group. It was a daring move, one that could either unite the world or push it further into chaos. But despite the risk, Olivia understood the importance of what Zethar was proposing. If successful, the joint task force could be the key to breaking the cycle of fear and mistrust. If it failed, however, it could solidify the divide and escalate the conflict to a point where there would be no turning back. Jonas, despite his earlier hesitations, now saw the wisdom in Zethar's plan. "It's a long shot," he said, "but if it works, it could change everything." Karen, always the optimist, agreed. "It's the only way we have left. We have to try." With Zethar's plan in motion, the team knew that the outcome was still uncertain. The stakes had never been higher, and every decision they made from here on out would have far-reaching consequences. But there was a sense of hope now, a glimmer of possibility. Zethar's leadership had given them a chance to avert war and to prove that unity between human and alien could be achieved. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, the team felt that they might just have a way forward, a way that could prevent the destruction of both their worlds. The future remained uncertain, but they had a plan. And sometimes, in the face of overwhelming odds, a plan was all they needed to believe that peace was still possible. The war that had once seemed inevitable was over. The tension between humanity and Zethar's people had reached its peak, with political and military forces pushing both sides to the brink of disaster. But in the final hour, a peace agreement had been reached, a historic accord that would change the future of both species forever. The document was signed in a grand ceremony held at the United Nations, a room filled with global leaders, military representatives, and members of the scientific community. Zethar, standing tall at the podium alongside the Secretary General of the United Nations, addressed the assembly with a calm, unwavering voice. "We are here today not as conquerors or invaders, but as survivors," Zethar said. We have come to live among you to help protect this planet that we all share. The peace we are signing today is not the end of our journey, but the beginning of a new chapter for both our peoples. It is a commitment to coexistence, understanding, and mutual respect. Despite the sincerity of Zethar's words, there was an undeniable undercurrent of tension in the room. On one side, there were those who saw the agreement as a necessary step towards securing a peaceful future, a chance to ensure the survival of both civilizations. On the other, there were skeptics, those who believed that this peace would only be temporary, a fragile truce held together by the thinnest of threads. The agreement, though signed, left many questions unanswered. The terms were not perfect, and both sides were forced to make compromises. The peace treaty outlined the conditions for the integration of Zethar's people into human society. It established shared governance in areas where both species would coexist, scientific research, environmental protection, and the management of resources, while also setting clear boundaries for the protection of each race's sovereignty. Zethar's people were granted citizenship, but they were still subject to the laws of Earth, and their participation in human political matters would be limited for the time being. In return, humanity would gain access to Zethar's advanced technology and knowledge, particularly in the fields of energy, space exploration, and medicine. Yet despite these agreements, the underlying issue remained: could both species truly live in peace side by side without conflict? Was this treaty enough to address the deep-rooted fears and suspicions that had emerged over the course of the conflict? As the ceremony concluded and the world's leaders returned to their respective countries, the true test of the peace agreement began. The team of explorers, Olivia, Jonas, Karen, and Zethar, had become symbols of the potential for peaceful coexistence. They were hailed as heroes by some, yet privately they grappled with the weight of the decisions they had made. "I don't know how to feel about all of this," Jonas admitted one evening, staring out over the city skyline. "We've done what we thought was right, but the world is still so divided. We're heroes to some, but enemies to others." Olivia, standing beside him, nodded. "The world has changed, but that doesn't mean it's all for the better. There are still people who see us as the reason for this chaos. For many, it's easier to blame us than to accept the responsibility of living in a world that's fundamentally different." Karen, who had always been the most optimistic of the group, offered a small smile. "We've made history. We've bridged two worlds, two species. Maybe that's enough. The rest of the world will catch up eventually. It won't be easy, but we've shown them what's possible." Despite her words, there was a sense of uncertainty in the air. The peace was fragile. The treaty had been signed, but whether it would hold depended on how both species adjusted to their new reality. There were still so many unknowns. Could humanity truly accept an alien race as part of their society? Would Zethar's people be able to adapt to life on Earth, or would their isolation prove too great a barrier to overcome? As Zethar and his people began to integrate into human society, the first challenges began to emerge. There were still widespread fears about the potential for alien technology to disrupt the existing power structures. Some saw the new knowledge as a boon, while others feared it would be weaponized against them. The presence of an entire civilization with advanced technology only deepened the divisions in society, making it clear that the path to true integration would not be easy. Zethar, for his part, remained committed to the vision of a peaceful future. "We are here to learn," he said during an early meeting with world leaders. "We seek only to share, to build a future where both our peoples can thrive. But we cannot do it alone. We need your trust. We need your help." However, Zethar's presence and the presence of his people stirred mixed feelings. Some viewed the aliens as a reminder of humanity's place in the vastness of the universe, small, fragile, and yet capable of greatness. Others saw them as a threat to their cultural identity, a force that would slowly but surely overtake Earth's existing way of life. For Olivia, Jonas, and Karen, the task ahead was clear. They had to continue to act as bridges between the two species, facilitating communication and understanding, even as tensions simmered beneath the surface. They were not just scientists anymore. They were diplomats tasked with ensuring that the fragile peace would not be shattered by fear, misunderstanding, or prejudice. As they met with various leaders, their conversations often turned to the future. "How do we help them understand?" Karen asked one day, referring to the human population at large. "How do we make sure they see Zethar's people as equals, not invaders?" Olivia paused, considering the question. "We start small. We teach, we share, and we lead by example. We show the world that cooperation is possible, that we don't have to destroy each other to coexist. We show them the benefits of this peace even if they can't see it yet. But the questions remained. Could two worlds so different truly find common ground? Could Zethar's people live among humans without changing everything? Or would humanity's fear of the unknown ultimately drive them apart? As the months passed, some progress was made. Joint research programs flourished, and the exchange of knowledge began to bear fruit. The first human-alien collaborative missions to explore the depths of the ocean and space were launched. There were setbacks, of course, incidents fueled by fear and miscommunication, but these were becoming less frequent. Still, there were challenges ahead. Both species were learning, adapting to each other's existence. It was clear that this new era would require patience and understanding. The road ahead would not be easy and the future was uncertain, but for the first time there was hope that humanity and Zethar's people could live together not as conquerors and the conquered, but as partners in an evolving world. In the end, the peace was not perfect. There were still obstacles, still fears to overcome. But as Olivia stood at the window one last time watching the sun set over a world forever changed, she knew one thing: the future was in their hands now. It was up to them to make it work. And for the first time they had a chance. The world had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The peace between humanity and Zethar's people was fragile, but it was the beginning of something new, something that for all its promise came with its own set of challenges. The exchange of knowledge, resources, and technology had opened doors to new possibilities, but the team of explorers who had once been celebrated as heroes now faced a realization that would shift the course of their journey forever. Humanity's progress, they understood, could not be built solely on the foundation of alien technology. To move forward, to truly thrive, humanity would need to adapt and evolve on its own terms. The team sat together in a quiet room, each lost in their thoughts about the monumental changes they had witnessed. Olivia, who had always been the calm and practical leader, spoke first, breaking the silence. "We've seen the immense potential of what can happen when we work together." She began, her voice steady but filled with a weight of understanding. "But the more I think about it, the more I realize that relying too heavily on what Zethar's people can offer us, on their technology, their knowledge, won't be enough. Humanity has to learn how to adapt, to grow on its own, or will remain forever dependent on them." Jonas, who had always been the most skeptical member of the team, nodded thoughtfully. "I get it now. It's like we've been given a cheat code to the future. But if we keep using that shortcut, we won't ever learn how to navigate the game ourselves." Karen, whose optimism had often driven them forward, looked at the others with a hint of concern in her eyes. "But can we really do it? Can we evolve that quickly, especially when everything is changing so fast? People aren't just accepting the aliens. They're terrified of losing what they know. The future is still unclear." Olivia turned to face her team, her expression resolute. "We have to try. We can't let fear hold us back from becoming the species we were always meant to be. It's time for humanity to prove that we're not just passive recipients of alien technology. We're capable of using it to enhance our own strengths, to overcome our flaws, and to carve out a future that is truly our own." But the question remained: could humanity overcome the growing pains of such a radical transformation? The team had witnessed the fear and resistance from those unwilling to accept change. Many saw Zethar's people as a threat, their presence too jarring, their influence too great. Would humanity rise to meet the challenge, or would they remain shackled by their fear of the unknown? As the weeks passed, changes began to unfold. Society, once resistant to the presence of the aliens, slowly began to adapt. In cities across the globe, joint human-alien research facilities were established, and collaborative projects flourished in areas like medicine, energy, and space exploration. The initial fears started to subside, and many began to see the benefits of cooperation. But as with any rapid transformation, the process wasn't without its hurdles. Societies that had once been homogeneous with a clear sense of identity now had to learn how to coexist with an entirely new species. Human culture was no longer the center of the world. It was just one piece in a much larger puzzle. People struggled to adjust to this new reality. Cultural integration was slow, and it was clear that for some, the concept of a diverse, cooperative world was still a difficult pill to swallow. "The world's not ready for this," Jonas said one evening. watching a broadcast of protests from across the globe. There's too much fear, too much anger. How do we convince them that this is the way forward? Olivia leaned back in her chair, her eyes on the news footage. We don't convince them, we show them. Actions speak louder than words. It's up to us to demonstrate that coexistence doesn't have to mean losing everything that makes us human. It means evolving. But just as the world seemed to be on the verge of finding balance, a new threat emerged, one that none of them had anticipated. A faction of Zethar's people, isolated from the majority and resistant to integration, began to make their presence felt. These dissidents, unwilling to accept the peace and collaboration with humanity, sought to take control of the alien technology and resources for themselves. They saw the peace agreement as a betrayal, a compromise that threatened their survival. The news spread quickly. There were Zethar rebels and they were moving fast. We can't let this happen. Zethar said, his voice tense as he addressed Olivia and the team. A splinter group of my people believes that humanity cannot be trusted. They seek to destroy everything we've worked for. The team was caught between the threat of alien dissidents and the fragile peace they had fought so hard to establish. They had helped create this new world, but now they had to defend it from those who would see it torn apart. But could they really stop this faction without risking everything they had worked for? Jonas, his voice filled with determination, spoke up. We can't back down. If we let them tear this apart, everything we've done will have been for nothing. We'll have lost the chance for real change. Olivia nodded. We have to stop them, not just for our future, but for the future of Zethar's people. We can't let fear lead to destruction. We can't let the same mistakes be repeated. The final confrontation loomed. Zethar's people, now divided by their differing visions for the future, found themselves facing their own civil war. The team, once explorers, now had to act as peacekeepers caught in the middle of a conflict that threatened to undo everything they had fought for. As the world held its breath, the team took the first steps toward preventing a catastrophe. Their mission was clear: stop the dissidents, secure the peace, and prove that humanity and Zethar's people could live together despite the odds. The next few days were filled with tension, strategy, and desperate attempts to prevent the unraveling of a delicate peace. The team fought not just for their survival, but for the future of two worlds that had, against all odds, managed to find a fragile understanding. The battle was far from over, but they had learned one vital lesson. No matter how much technology they gained, it was their ability to adapt and work together that would determine their fate. As the team prepared for the final confrontation, Olivia couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that lay ahead. This is it, she said quietly, the moment of truth. Can we stop them, or will this be the end of everything we've built? Jonas turned to her, his eyes steady. We'll stop them. We have to. And as the final battle began, the question remained: would humanity and Zethar's people succeed in overcoming their differences, or would the forces of division tear them apart forever? Only time would tell. But for now, they fought on for their worlds, for their future, and for the hope that in the end, cooperation would triumph over fear. It felt as though the world had barely begun to breathe again when the ground beneath their feet shifted once more. The fragile peace that had been painstakingly negotiated between humanity and Zethar's people was now threatened by a new external force. The rebels, those alien dissidents who had once been the harbingers of division, had returned this time with a devastating new ally. A faction of human extremists who believed that the world could not survive alongside alien technology. United by their shared fear, these two factions sought to destroy everything that had been built. The threat they posed was undeniable, and once again the peace between the two species was in jeopardy. Olivia stood at the control center, watching as the screens flickered with images of chaos. Rebels from both sides had begun staging coordinated attacks, tearing through major cities and strategic locations. The human extremists, armed with alien weaponry, stolen from the dissidents, wreaked havoc across the globe. At the same time, Zethar's people were under siege in their sanctum, their hidden cities under threat from this deadly alliance. The stakes were higher than ever. We can't just sit back and wait for this to blow over, Jonas said, his voice tight with frustration. This isn't just an isolated skirmish, it's an all-out war. Karen, who had spent much of her life focused on scientific discovery, now found herself caught in a political and military nightmare. We knew there were risks, she said quietly, her face pale with the weight of the situation. But I never imagined it would come to this. We've been trying to build bridges and now everything's falling apart. Olivia took a deep breath, her mind racing. We need to act. This is no longer about diplomacy. We're facing a real threat and we have to defend both of our worlds. If we don't act now, we risk losing everything. The decision to fight was clear, but the next question was how. The rebel faction was well organized and technologically advanced, and the human extremists, fueled by fear and hatred, had become a dangerous force in their own right. The team had a significant advantage in terms of Zethar's people's knowledge of advanced technology, but it was still unclear if they could overcome the enemy's numbers and firepower. This time, Olivia said, her voice firm, "We need to strike at the heart of their operation. We've learned from the past, now we need to use that knowledge to win." But as they began strategizing their approach, an unexpected and decisive shift occurred. Zethar, who had remained largely in the background, stepped forward. "I will lead the charge," he said, his voice as calm and resolute as ever. "My people are under attack, and I will not let them be destroyed. It is time to end this war once and for all." The room fell silent. Jonas and Karen exchanged uneasy glances. Zethar's involvement in the battle was a game-changer. On one hand, his leadership and advanced alien technology could tip the scales in their favor. But on the other, his participation could escalate the conflict to a level that would make diplomacy impossible. "Zethar," Olivia said, her voice cautious but steady, "this is a dangerous move. We're not just fighting rebels anymore. There are people who don't trust you. If you enter the battle, it might make things worse. This could be the very thing that sets the world on fire." Zethar met her gaze, his amber eyes unwavering. "I understand the risks, but we have no other choice. If we do not defend our people now, we will lose everything. The balance of power must be restored." The decision to include Zethar in the battle changed the course of the war. As Zethar's forces prepared to deploy, the team of explorers found themselves at the forefront of the conflict, once again tasked with navigating the complexities of peace and war. But this time, they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of both species. The battlefield was a chaotic mess of fire and destruction. Cities lay in ruins as the rebel forces and human extremists clashed with Zethar's loyalists and the team's newly formed defense forces. Olivia, Jonas, and Karen fought alongside Zethar's people, their once academic pursuits now transformed into desperate efforts to survive. They had to rely on every ounce of their knowledge and experience to counter the overwhelming onslaught. Zethar leading the charge was a force to be reckoned with. His people, having lived in the depths of the ocean for millennia, had an innate understanding of the world's ecosystems and advanced technologies. As the conflict escalated, Zethar activated powerful defense systems buried deep within the sanctum, massive energy shields, and weapons that began turning the tide. But even with these advantages, the rebel forces were relentless. The battle reached its peak when the team was forced to make a last-ditch effort to stop the extremist human faction from gaining control of Zethar's most powerful weapon. The weapon, capable of leveling entire cities, had been seized by the rebels, and if it fell into their hands, it could mean the end of everything. "This is it," Jonas said, his voice tense. "If we don't stop them now, it's over. We have to get to that weapon." With Zethar leading the charge, the team pushed forward into the heart of enemy territory, battling their way through the remnants of cities destroyed by both sides. As they neared the weapon, they realized just how close they were to losing. The weapon was activated, and the countdown to launch had already begun. "Do it now," Olivia shouted as they closed in on the control panel. With a swift motion, she disabled the system just as the countdown hit its final moments. The rebels, shocked by the turn of events, began to retreat. The human extremists, seeing their plans unravel, scattered into the shadows, unable to hold their ground any longer. The battle was over. Zethar, standing among the wreckage of the battlefield, turned to the team. "We have won," he said, his voice echoing in the silence that followed. "But this victory comes at a cost. We have lost much, and there will be those who will never accept our presence. But this is only the beginning." As the dust settled and the world began to process the scale of the conflict, the team found themselves once again in a position to guide humanity and Zethar's people toward a new future. The battle had been fierce, but it had also proven one thing: the path to peace would not be simple. It would take sacrifice, effort, and a willingness to adapt to a world that was no longer what it once was. The question now was whether humanity and Zethar's people could rebuild, or if this final battle had been the beginning of an endless cycle of conflict. Would they learn from the mistakes of the past, or would they repeat them doomed to destroy one another? In the end, Olivia stood looking at the horizon, the sun setting on a world forever changed. "We've won this battle," she said quietly, "but the real work starts now." The dust of battle had settled, and the once chaotic, fractured world began to breathe again. The threat from the dissidents and the extremists had been vanquished, but the true challenge remained how to build a future where humanity and Zethar's people could coexist without fear, without division. The war had shown them the stakes, but it also revealed the path to cooperation, even if it wasn't an easy one. In the aftermath of the conflict, the world began to rebuild. Cities that had been ravaged by war slowly started to recover, and the political landscape, once fractured and divided, began to shift toward a more unified future. Humanity, forced to adapt to the reality of a universe far more complex than they had ever imagined, had taken its first steps toward true interspecies collaboration. Zethar's people, once isolated beneath the oceans, were now integrating into human society in ways that no one could have predicted. Their advanced knowledge and technology were helping to heal the planet's environmental wounds, develop new energy sources, and explore space. Zethar himself, once a distant leader of an isolated race, now found himself in a position where he was not only a leader of his people, but a guide to humanity as well. The alliance had transformed both species, and they were both learning from each other in ways that no one had anticipated. "How do we define what we've done?" Olivia asked, standing beside Zethar as they watched the horizon from a balcony in a newly built research facility built in collaboration with Zethar's people. "It's hard to believe it's been so long since we first met. Everything has changed. The world is different now. But what will history say about us?" Zethar's gaze was steady, his amber eyes reflecting a wisdom that came from centuries of isolation. "History will remember you as survivors, as beings who chose to grow, to learn, and to adapt, not just to your world, but to the wider universe. You will be remembered as the species who overcame fear, who rose to the challenge, and saw what was possible when two worlds decided to work together. It may not have been easy, but the future will be shaped by your choice." Olivia nodded slowly. The weight of Zethar's words hung heavy in the air. They had become part of a larger story now, one that would be told for generations. The story of how humanity faced its greatest test and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. Jonas, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up, his voice carrying a note of cautious optimism. "Maybe that's the legacy we'll leave. But the real question is, how do we move forward now? We've survived, but can we thrive?" "It's up to us," Olivia replied. "This is only the beginning. We've seen what we're capable of, but now we have to decide what kind of world we want to build. One where cooperation isn't just the result of necessity, but a shared vision. A world where both species can continue to grow together." The idea of collaboration began to take root more deeply across the globe. From scientific fields to cultural exchanges, humanity and Zethar's people worked together to learn from each other. As the days turned into months, the once insurmountable divide started to fade, and slowly but surely, society adapted. When history looked back on this time, it would tell the tale of how humanity emerged from a period of isolation, arrogance, and division to embrace the unknown. The first chapter of the intergalactic era began with humanity learning to extend its hand to another species, not to conquer or enslave, but to work together. The records of these events would live on as a testament to humanity's resilience, adaptability, and capacity for cooperation. And perhaps more importantly, history would also recognize that this was not a victory born of force, but one born of understanding. Humanity had not just survived the encounter with, as for the future, it was clear that the partnership between humanity and Zethar's people would continue to evolve. The planets in the solar system, once the exclusive domain of humankind, were now open for exploration by two species, both with a wealth of knowledge and experience to share. The potential for discovering the secrets of the cosmos together was limitless. Would they one day, as Zethar had suggested, uncover the mysteries of the universe hand in hand? "You will never be alone in this universe again," Zethar said quietly as he stood beside Olivia. "Our peoples will explore the stars together. We will understand the depths of the oceans, the expanse of space, and the very fabric of reality itself." The thought filled Olivia with awe. The universe was now their shared frontier. No longer would humanity look up at the stars and wonder if there were others like them out there. Now the answer was clear: they were not alone. And the path forward, while fraught with challenges, was one of endless possibility. For Zethar's people, adapting to life on land was a gradual but profound change. As beings who had lived beneath the oceans for millions of years, they faced unique challenges in adjusting to Earth's terrestrial environment. Physically, they had evolved to breathe in the oxygen-rich atmosphere and to endure the pressure of the deep sea. But the transition to living on land required more than just physical adaptation. Their society, which had once been based on isolation and self-sufficiency, needed to integrate into human urban life. Zethar and his people worked closely with humanity to find ways to adapt to the atmosphere and gravity of Earth. They developed special suits that allowed them to move freely in human environments, and over time, some of them began to live without the suits, gradually adapting to the atmospheric pressure, though they still required some assistance with hydration and nutrition from their aquatic origin. This isn't easy, Zethar admitted during one of their early meetings with human scientists. But we are learning. We've always adapted to our environment, now we must do so again. As months passed, the integration of Zethar's people into human society began to show positive results. Their advanced knowledge of the oceans and space, combined with their new understanding of Earth's ecosystems, helped foster global efforts to preserve the planet. From environmental restoration to breakthroughs in energy and technology, their contributions were invaluable. However, their greatest legacy may be the lessons they taught humanity about resilience, adaptation, and collaboration. As time moved on, humanity and Zethar's people continued to explore new horizons, both on Earth and beyond. The possibility of a new era, one where two species could learn from one another, share knowledge, and explore the universe together, was no longer a distant dream. It was reality. "We're just beginning," Olivia said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "There's so much more to discover, and now we have each other to do it with." And so the story of humanity, intertwined with the legacy of Zethar's people, became a tale that would be passed down through generations. A tale of overcoming fear, of learning to adapt, and of proving that even the greatest divides could be bridged. Together, humanity and Zethar's people would face the challenges of the future, explore the mysteries of the cosmos, and continue to grow side by side as they embarked on the greatest adventure of all. The future was theirs to create, and together they would shape it.